Bonjour, Kinamagi and Nene Ireland Indigenicas coming live with this production of Social Studies Television. Today's episode, Chapter 4, Lesson 5, Colonial Economies. In today's episode, we will look at our Section 5 Colonial Economies from the Michigan Open Book, and we'll also look at a slide share looking more closely at some of these jobs. Questions to guide inquiry in this chapter include: how did the geographical, financial, and religious status of the colonists affect where and how they lived? What motivated each colony to form? What effect did the colonists' choices have on their colonies? Some vocabulary: export, which is a situation where you make a product and send it out to another place, such as if we were to export baskets to Canada. Excess is the extra, often in the scope of you sell the excess farm goods after you have what you need to survive, make a little money with the excess. And textiles are often things made with linen or cloth. We think clothes would be a big one here. As part of this lesson, we will look at the graphs and we will read the text prior to the slide share. At the end, you'll come back and answer a few questions in the Google Classroom. So we'll start out by looking at this image here, and it breaks it down. You have the New England colonies here in the Northeast. Some of their primary products include dried fish, whale oil, livestock, and wood products. So you could guess that there are going to be cows, fish, and trees in this region. And being a coastal area, that makes complete sense. The middle colonies, which is the darker green right here, including New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, they are grain, iron, and wood products. And so obviously that's going to give us a hint that there are a lot of trees, but there are still farms where you can raise things like wheat to make the grain. In the mountains, there is iron ore, so they're able to make iron products as well. In the southern colonies, tobacco, rice, bread, flour, indigo, and grain is an indication that these are areas that are much more dedicated to agriculture. Now, the reading. The colonists were not lazy people. They had to work very hard for everything they had. They all depended on each other to do certain jobs. And if someone did not do their job, many people were affected. As you read, try to decide which jobs were the most important. There is no right answer to this question, so your opinion is important. Regional economies. Before looking at this section, you took a moment to review what economics is. And economics is the system of buying and selling and getting what you need and all of those things. We think about business. If you can't remember, look back at chapter 1. Look at the map, as we did. What products seem to be the most important to the northern colonies? We got a highlight of that. Remember, the northern colonies are Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, aka New England. As you probably noticed from the map, the New England colonies did not do a lot of farming. Instead, many New Englanders worked in the lumber or fishing industry. Lumber from the forest became a primary export for them. They also used the lumber to make items like houses, barrels, and ships. It may seem odd to us to make barrels, but then they were used to store just about everything. Barrels held grain, fish, and other important resources. The New Englanders were also very well known for their ability to build ships. This made New England important in the trade industry. The problem with exporting was that the colonists did not get to decide on the value of their goods. Those decisions were dictated by the king, and the colonists had to live with whatever he said. Look at the product map again. Do you see any big differences between the primary products in the northern colonies and middle colonies? Remember, the middle colonies are Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, and New Jersey. And as you look at it, you could start seeing that farming and iron is a big thing in the middle colonies, where it wasn't so much in New England. Middle colonies focused a lot on farming to keep their economy moving. Because of the farmable land, the middle colonies were very successful at growing crops. In fact, they got so good at growing crops like grains, wheat, barley, oats, etc., they were often called the breadbasket colonies. They grew so much food they often had an excess, so they would ship their extra food to other colonies and even England. The middle colonies had a few other exports aside from their agricultural exports. They also had a large amount of iron ore, lumber, textiles, fur, lumber, all of again, all of those products. They made a significant amount of money from their iron ore products. They were able to manufacture many useful products from their iron ore, including plows, tools, kettles, and nails. These products were sold amongst the colonies, and the remainder were sent to England. The economy of the southern colonies was based mostly on farming. Many families operated small farms. However, the South is known for their plantation style farming, which often called for a large workforce. This is where slavery was most often used, because it was a way to have that large workforce for less cost. While slavery is an economic institution, it is a cruel and inhumane system. The main crops grown in the South were tobacco, rice, and indigo. Of those products, tobacco was by far the most profitable. In fact, tobacco became known as black gold in the South. All right, let's look at a couple of the jobs, and I'm going to enlarge this here. We'll start back on screen 1. So some of the jobs of the colonists would have in the colonial occupations. One was a carpenter. That's someone who would work with wood. You could build homes with it, barns, even chairs and tables. Very important job in that era. The silversmith, which ironically, you could take all of your extra money, melt it down into one big piece of silver. That was one way of doing it, and a silversmith would be happy to help you with that endeavor. The basket maker, just like with us in Nishnabik, we were able to, you need to carry stuff, and one way to do it is make baskets. Whereas we would use black ash, there in the colonies, you would use whatever trees were closest to you, whether it be ash or something else. The chandler is the person who made the candles. This is prior to the days of electricity, so if you wanted to see, you had to light a candle. No different than if we used an Ishkode. Fire is the light at this time. The blacksmith was someone who could melt down metals and make everything from tools to horseshoes to pots and kettles. Very important job within the colonial era. The tailor is someone who would make clothing or fix clothing, depending on the situation. The wig maker. So as it turns out, people like to wear wigs. Whether you be a member of Parliament or the congressional groups that had the nice powder wigs, this was a common thing to do. The cooper, they're the ones who make the barrels. You need to be able to carry things as mentioned in the text and store things, and that's what the job of the cooper was. The gunsmith is someone who would produce and fix guns. In this era, we're talking more of the musket style, which are frequently in need of repair. The cobbler and the weaver, they would be able to shape wood, and you could do it as a shoe, for instance. The brick maker and wheelwright, someone's got to make wheels for the wagons, and bricks are becoming an increasingly used resource to build homes and buildings and factories, and even in some spots, roads. The apothecary, fancy word for the pharmacy or where you get your medicine. The cabinet maker and printer. Somebody could make cabinets so you could store stuff. And printer, this is not in an era where you could just, jump on Google and find something to read. Somebody actually had to put the letters in order on these giant presses to make things like books and newspapers. And it was a very difficult, time consuming, but important job. Hopefully, in this section, you learned a little bit about the colonial economies. At this point, you should go back into your Google Classroom, complete any further tasks, and I hope you all have a mental Gidget Guide. Bama P.